Hi, everyone. I'm Jason Morgan, editor of Fleet Equipment, and welcome to Fleet Equipment Unscripted. Today, we're talking with Jason Miller, Cooper Tire and Rubber Company's National Fleet Channel Sales Manager. Jason, good to see you again. I know we caught up here a couple months ago. I coveted
Good
that
to be here.
you're still on the road there. You're still,
Still on the road.
oh my goodness. I feel for you. I'll be heading out here soon. So good to catch up with you and touch base. With you being on the road, I did want to touch base with you. I know you're out there talking with a lot of customers. Wanted to kind of get your beat on what's happening with tires in the fleet world right now, and maybe talk about some scrap tire analysis tips and tricks here for everybody. So we'll kick it off. First one. So when you're out there talking with customers, what are you seeing in the way of out of service causes for tires? And have shifting duty cycles or applications during the past 5 or 6 months had any impact on tire usage out there?
Well, it's like a moving target right now, and the truckers that are running hard, and they're running really, really hard. And actually, there was a little time when some of the trucking companies, like the guys hauling luxury boats, maybe they weren't quite as busy as the ones hauling toilet paper.
Right.
But those flatbeds are being reassigned into other tasks. Housing is exploding right now. So if you weren't hauling a luxury boat, you're hauling lumber now.
Yep.
So even some of that utilization now is coming back. Finding drivers is so hard to do for all kinds of reasons. But the guys that are running hard. So I don't know that I'm seeing a dramatic shift in certain things popping up that I hadn't seen before, but you're seeing more of some things than others, and they seem to be, for example, underinflation has always been an issue.
Right.
So we talked about that on our last call. Underinflation at its worst winds up in the scrap pile. And if it winds up in the scrap pile, then that's something we get to look at. And there's signs of that. And we're seeing more signs of that. We're seeing more road breakdowns from customers who normally don't have breakdowns. If it's a van trailer, sometimes they're able to take the tire back with them and it goes in the scrap pile and we have a chance to look at it. Sometimes they just wind up on the road, so we don't get a chance to look at it. So one of the trends that we're seeing is the percentage of tires we actually get to look at are going down a little bit because they're winding off being changed in the road and we don't get to see them.
Right.
That's a problem because we don't really get to see if it was, because a tire failure can be a lot of things, right? If you hit something on the road and it's an instant failure, that's one problem that it's hard to do anything about it. But if it's a nail that got picked up that was driven on for 20, 30, 40, 50 miles before it caused a failure, you can find signs of that when you're doing a scrap analysis.
Right.
So we need to get those tires back as much as possible so that we can see what the cause of failure is. But underinflation leads to several things that we see in a scrap pile. And this is the kind of thing I think we're seeing a little bit more of right now. You're seeing irregular wear from underinflation. You're seeing casings get rejected by retreaders because they have fatigued from underinflation. And frankly, you're seeing a lot of just outright failures. And if you look hard enough, you can see outright failures from zippers. And for those of you who, your listeners and viewers who don't know what a zipper failure is, it looks just like a zipper on a jacket. The steel cords, when they flex from being underinflated, eventually they separate. They separate in almost a perfect zipper formation.
Mhm.
So if you see those kind of failures, you know that started as an underinflation cause. So that seems to be on the increase, possibly due to duty cycles.
Mm.
A few other things that we're seeing in scrap that aren't really duty cycle related, but us tire manufacturers, we keep trying to take the best and make it better. So we tweak tread compounds, we tweak the tread patterns, we tweak the shape of the grooves. And I've seen a couple of big manufacturers who shall remain nameless, who are going to a little bit more of a square groove instead of the V groove. And
Mhm.
V-shaped grooves are nice because if a stone gets in, it kind of flies back out. Not so nice if you're behind that truck when the stone flies out, but it's nice for the tire. If it's a
Right.
square groove, that stone kind of finds a home in there and then it drills through into the casing.
Right.
And if it drills and hits the steel, it can cause rust, which can cause a tire failure. But for sure, if it holds stones, it can actually get to the point where you'll be rejected by your retreader, even if it doesn't fail.
Mm.
So, a couple things to watch for. We've all seen it, right? You've walked up to your car and you're going to go to this store and you look down and the tread, you see a stone, and maybe you take your key and pop it out. Maybe you bent your key when you did it. It's not a great idea, but we've all been there.
Right.
If you can, and you see it pop out one or two stones, that's fine, but it isn't the one or two stones that usually cause a problem. If you look down and you see a tread that has 30, 40, 50, 60 stones in it, a driver is not going to sit there with a screwdriver and pop out each one of those stones. But they will eventually drill down into the steel and cause a casing to be rejected, or in worst case scenarios, cause the tire to fail. And, I used to do training for highway patrol and CHP, and I would ask them what percentage, what amount of steel is allowed to show before that tire should be taken out of service. The answer is 0.
Right.
So technically, if a CHP or DOT officer pops a stone out and sees steel at the bottom of that hole, technically that's an out of service tire. So a couple things to watch for as I'm talking is if you see big stones in there, pull the big ones out and see if there's any steel. And if you're running a tread pattern that seems to be holding stones, you might want to consider an alternate tread pattern.
Right. Okay. So, and definitely a lot to unpack there, right? And I think that one of the things you touched on that I wanted to highlight is the fact that you aren't seeing tires because you're getting replaced on the side of the road. And not only is that just a safety issue, right? You don't need tires failing while the truck's moving right there, but also the cost of replacing a tire on the road instead of at a regular interval or a service interval is nothing anyone should really want to be dealing with right now when margins are tight and operating costs are terrible. Drivers are hard to find.
It's the cost of the breakdown, which takes a $400 tire and turns it into a $700 event. It's like you just said, it is the downtime and the driver dissatisfaction is on the side of the road. And frankly, pretty exciting. I just came through a winter storm in September. So the weather is making us curious. I would not want to be a driver on the side of the road with a tire issue with either that or the wildfires that are happening. So you want those trucks running.
Right.
And now more than ever, with tough to find good drivers to keep all the freight moving, and we really need this freight moving. You sure don't need trucks on the side of the road for all kinds of reasons, safety reasons, productivity reasons, cost reasons.
Right.
So a lot of that can be identified in the scrap to see if there's trends of things that you need to do.
Right. So with that in mind, because I mean, that's the other thing is standing in front of a scrap pile right now, you can kind of get the feeling of like, this is not what I should be doing, right? Like it could feel like there's lots going on in the office and with the trucks. Maybe looking at this pile of scrap isn't exactly what I want to be doing, but it's important, right? I mean, at times like these, focusing on tires just hugely important because of how costly and how easily they can go out of service. So what are your big scrap tire analysis tips? What are some tips and tricks that get me moving, don't take up a ton of time, but are super effective?
Well, I chuckle because the first time you had me on, I was talking about crawling around trucks, taking air pressure, and now I'm talking about going through scrap tires. I'm going to be the favorite guest on this show for sure. It's like, oh no, what do you want us to do now? But yes, there is, to coin a phrase from the old 49ers, there's gold in them there hills. There is gold in those tires. There's something to be learned. There's money to pull out of that scrap tire pile. So what are the top tips? The top tips is the easiest one is there's probably a warranty recovery somewhere in that pile. So if a casing cannot be retreaded and it's rejected by a retreader, it might have a casing warranty. It might have been retreaded incorrectly by another retreader, so it might have a retread warranty coming, or it might have failed because of a failed repair. And if the repair wasn't done properly, you might have a warranty coming. So that's the easy one. That's what we call the low-hanging fruit.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that the scrap tire pile will tell us is whether or not you should consider a different tire selection. So if you recently switched to a different tire because it got longer wear, better fuel economy, or nice handling or good traction, and you're starting to see more casing failures. Let's face it, right now, because of productivity, some fleets are going to a tire just for a low price.
Right.
If you save $50 on a tire, but the casing of $80 casing, it's not retreadable, you actually lost $30 by making that switch.
Right.
So that's something that we want to learn. So tire selection. Most important, just like my last time I was on the show, is maintenance practices. You can see early warning signs of underinflation, misalignment, curbing. Curbing is a big one that we're seeing now because the guys the truckers, guys and women that are traveling long distances, now they're picking up at a distribution center, delivering toilet paper. Those distribution centers often have curbs. We're seeing curbs for line haul. It's like, who sees curbing in line haul? But that's a new thing that's popping up.
Right.
So for drivers, if you start to see what happens when you roll up on those curbs and you see the curbing that caused the reject, that's something you can learn from it. But there's 4 questions I ask when I look at every tire in a scrap pile. I inspect it. I decide what to do with it. Number 1, can it be returned to service? Because oftentimes, if it's just pulled for irregular wear on a drive position because it's making so much noise that the guy who's asleep on your team, you got team drivers, one's sleeping, one's driving, he can't sleep because the tires are roaring or vibrating.
Right.
That tire often can still be returned to service on either a regional local application or on a trailer application. So question 1, can it be returned to service? Question 2, can it be retreaded? It's not necessarily scrap. You'll find some that winds up in the scrap pile that actually can be retreaded. Maybe not for you, because maybe you're running line haul and you have a very tight specification, but your retreader might be able to retread that for a local P&D operation.
Okay.
So he might have a use for that tire, even though you do not. Do you have money coming? So that's the warranty I talked about earlier. You might have money coming from the new tire manufacturer, the retreader, or whoever did a failed repair. And can you learn anything, which I think is the point of going through the scrap.
Right.
So somewhere in there, if we can reduce road failures, that makes it worth your time to do it. If we can improve your warranty recovery, that makes it worth your time to do it. If we can learn something from that to reduce how many tires wind up in the scrap pile, that's something that makes us all worth doing.
Right.
So
Right.
those are some of the big things that we get out of the scrap analysis.
Right. So let's take warranty as an example, because anyone hears warranty, you go, "Oh, okay, warranty. Now you have my attention. Let's get some money back for this."
Almost hate to bring that one up.
I know, but it's great. Okay, I dig through the pile. Aha, I found a warranty issue here.
Yep.
But that also means connecting that tire to the service instance or to the retreader or to the application. There's a lot of information I have to start collecting around that tire now to submit the warranty claim, make sure it's successful. How do you recommend kind of overall in scrap tires, making sure that, okay, I know from start to finish, this tire was in this application, went through this service process, and now here's the warranty. I can just push all that information out. What are your recommendations for keeping all that straight?
So we have a form, and most big tire manufacturers have a form that you can use. You can fill out the form, and then you can store it, and then look at trends, graph it out. But I think the recommendation I would make to most people who are trying to do this, whether you're a owner operator, whether you run a small fleet or whether you run a large fleet, find a high quality dealer that you can partner with, because the high quality dealer already has these systems in place, and the dealers will help you look through the tire and they'll help you find out what might have caused it to fail, and they will start to help you track that data. Some of them have their own tracking systems, some of them have manufacturer driven systems, but find a good dealer that you trust that can help you go through that with you. Plus, that's the dealer who's going to be submitting the warranty claims.
Right, right.
And they're also the ones going to help you make recommendations on whether or not the tire you've chosen is the best tire for your application.
Right, right. So funny story. I think the majority of my stories boil down to talk to the professionals, which is what I do on a daily basis and why I called you. But even I completely forgot about the landing here, the end part when we were talking about this, because you get so wrapped up in the problem, you get so wrapped up in the challenge and the heady solution and the complexities of it that it's really easy to forget. Hey, you have help out there. Give the people who know what they're doing a call. They are more than happy to help you. Just raise the flag, right?
And they are, and one tip that I'm thinking about while we're doing this, talk about what your specifications are. And when you talk about what your specifications are, that's really worth, maybe you talk to 2 or 3 dealers that you trust. Your dealer who's primarily this brand is going to make recommendations based on his favorite brand. That brand is make recommendations on her favorite brand. So you talk to a few and kind of outweigh through what the recommendation is. But talk through, do I want to run do I want to retread a casing only to 5 years? Do I want to go to 6 years? Do I want to only retread these brands of casings? do I allow this many repairs? There's certain things, like it used to be only a certain number of repairs per quadrant. Well, that all started with bias tires because the bias is an angle. And if you had migrating water and moisture, it would run down that bias and you would not want to have two repairs on the same. On a radial, that's not really the case because they're not on a bias. So repairs per quadrant are not as critical on a radial tire as they were with bias. Some people are still hanging on to old antiquated information for what should not be retreaded. So you can partner with a good dealer. But another tip, when that tire is removed, take a crayon and mark it. What's wrong with it? Because oftentimes the reason we don't do scrap is because it's so time consuming. And you'll take one tire, and we've all seen it, and you'll spend 12, 15, 18 minutes on a single tire. It's in the pile. There's got to be something wrong with it, but I have no idea what it is.
Right.
And if somebody would just take it off and mark, this is why I pulled it out of service. Just mark why I pulled it out of service. Now at least it's like, I see it. Maybe I need to inflate it. Maybe it's a little repair bulge. Maybe it's a little separation or something, but you won't see it sometimes when it's deflated.
Right, right. Well, and to your earlier point, if it's just a regular tire wear and I can get it retreaded or put on a different truck or a different application, then yeah, I would definitely, that would be more apparent because there's not really, maybe the tread is just scribbled out wherever the wear is or anything like that. That's an easy one to go fix, right?
Yeah, and I'll see some where they write OOR for out of round on the tread.
Okay.
Got it. Sometimes out of round, sometimes out of round. And this one's a little hard to look for. So if you haven't done it before, maybe you need somebody to kind of walk you through the first one. But mounting a truck tire isn't like a car tire. Car tires have a fairly parallel bead, so they inflate and they go boing, and they're concentric. Truck tires are a 15-degree taper. So when you inflate them, they stretch into place. And if they aren't properly lubricated and they aren't concentric when you inflate them, they tend to inflate not concentric, and they go down the road like this, and you'll get a wear here and then a wear here. It's a mini maxi wear is what we call it. Once we remove it from service, you can see signs on the bead with the distance between where it's worn from the rim flange to that little ridge, different names for that ridge on the side of the tire.
Right.
And that can cause a tire to not be running down the road and cause an imbalance or a vibration. And so you remove it from service for the vibration, you put it in the scrap pile, but you don't write anything on it. It's like, so what do I do with this tire? Well, if it is remounted properly, it might be fine unless the wear is already at a certain point. Then it's going to be fine to run out on a trailer. It might run for a long time on a trailer. At the very least, the tire is fine for retreading. It's probably fairly fresh casing.
Right, right, right. No, very cool, and that's a very good example. I know, I know that we joke about it not being exciting, but I promise, once this pandemic's weird stuff is over, I'm gonna come out to a tire pile with you, and we're gonna dive through it because I love these little nuances, right? The little investigation of why this is out of service and what you can do about it. It's super fun.
That's the cool thing when I finally do have a chance to do one. And in fact, I'm on my way right now to rural Washington to go through one with one of my fleets because I like to do it with them. And they think the same thing that most people. Oh, boy, that's fun. Let's crawl through a bunch of scrap tires out. And they're usually dirty. And some of them bite. I will warn you, be careful because they have steel cords.
Right.
So wear heavy gloves with a thick leather, palm. So, but after we go through them, there is so much to be learned in those piles that everybody I go through them with is a believer. So I'd love to have you do it. If there's other fleets that want to do it, contact me. I would love to go through a scrap tire pile. I'm one of those weird people that love to do it because it's so interesting when you see, and most of it, you don't really need to be a true tire expert because most of it, if you just stop and think, what could possibly cause this to happen? And you look inside, you look outside, most of it is fairly intuitive.
Right, right, right. No, I love that. And to your points about fleets reaching out, for sure, you'll jump up to ahead of the line. I'll definitely wait till all the customers are taken care of. But
yeah,
for sure, fun. Jason, always great catching up with you. I appreciate you taking the time. Good luck on your travels and hitting the road here today, and I'm sure we'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks for having me. Nice to see you again.
You too.